I've tried to follow and listen to as much of the discussions in relation to this bill as possible, and I confess that some of the legal arguments that were happening earlier were beyond me. But I wanted to just raise a couple of points in relation to first of all, the delaying point. I said in the second reading, and I maintain it now, which is that this bill has been a long time coming. The sense in which the public perceive the debate about how we deal with taking control of our own laws as the UK, having left the EU, is not that it's been rushed through, but rather that it's been sluggish, blocked, and that any attempts at trying to really force through that break from the European Union has been obstructed by people who didn't approve of the decision taken in 2016. Now, I am very sensitive to the perfectly reasonable criticisms that have been made throughout the arguments that I've heard, and I would like, the Minister does have to give some reassurance that there aren't unintended consequences of this bill, and that important laws are not lost, that they don't intend to lose, but sort of lose by accident, which is the way that it's been described. And I think that that is of some concern, and reassurances that they are in control are not that reassuring when we look at the parlour state of the way everything else is falling apart at the moment. So I myself have got reservations. That's just to clarify that. But I do think that saying delay it till 2028 will be understandably seen as quite simply putting off the task. And I think, therefore, that does not, in my terms, work at all. I did want to also address the point that the noble Baroness Ludford made when she rightly and correctly noted that when we were in the European Union, much of the law that was not looked over by Parliament was indeed put forward by UK ministers. And indeed, it is true that for many politicians in the UK, they felt much happier dealing with getting laws through Brussels and Strasbourg than being answerable to the UK public, to the electorate in this country. They actually quite liked taking their laws over there, coming back over to the UK and saying, what can we do about it? It's just been imposed on us by the EU. I've always been critical of that. But there's no doubt about it that there was less fuss made in both houses about the fact that laws were not scrutinised by Parliament at that time. I want there to be more scrutiny by Parliament now, but I think that the reason why people are suspicious of opposition to this bill, which you cannot blame them for, outside of Parliament and outside of Westminster and Whitehall, is that they have not seen over the years the same enthusiasm for scrutinising law that was imposed on the UK, and I agree, often under the auspices of UK ministers having agreed it over in Brussels. In other words, there is a certain amount of forked tongues going on here. There's no doubt about it. So I think that, whereas I want to hold the government to account for the problems with this bill, my nervousness is that it does feel mired in politics. And I can't get away from the feeling that, therefore, any delays or tactics that will say, can't we just wait a bit longer, actually lets the government off the hook. The government should have got on with this a lot longer ago, rather than having to now rush it through. But any delays are likely to cause, I think, real cynicism outside of this place. But on the other hand, the government do need to reassure me before we get to report. Oh, sorry. Sorry. No, you were. Yes, sorry.
Activities. No, I just wanted to say to the noble lady, I probably won't go into lawmaking in the EU. The noble lady was an MEP herself. To say that lawmaking in Brussels is not democratic is, to my mind, ridiculous. But what I wanted to address particularly was her assertion that objections to this bill are mired in politics. Had she been, as I have been, here through the entire 4 days, now nearly 4.5, on this bill, across the House, the objections have been because it is an executive power grab. Almost no reference has been made to the Brexit referendum or the policy of Brexit. It is the way that this bill is constructed and the power that the government is concentrating in itself. It's a question of the power, the rights of Parliament and the type of governance we're objecting to. It's not political in that sense. It is constitutional, the objections to this bill.
I appreciate that I haven't been in the chamber for all of that time, although I have been here a fair few hours, actually, one way or another, and I've read everything that was said in previous discussions, so I don't feel as though I'm just wandering in to make this point. And I've also talked to people outside of this House about the way they are understanding this discussion, and I'm trying to draw attention to that. No, that's fine. That's fine.
Forgive me.
Who said this is all political? What?
And I'm very grateful to Lady Meacher for giving way to my question to Lady Fox. So if Lady Fox is not concerned about Clause 10, does that mean she disagrees with the Delegated Powers Committee very, very clear comments on it, where they do see it as a power grab and they think it's a completely inappropriate use for secondary legislation?
I am concerned, maybe if I can just do this bit and then I am concerned about aspects of this bill from a delegated powers point of view, as I have been on a range of bills that we have had at this House. And maybe it's because, as was just in the previous intervention, made clear to me that there is a disagreement about what democracy is, because I do not think that whilst we were in the European Union that was a democratic, accountable form of law. That point, I didn't make that point. That point has just been made back to me. I'm saying that although I understand that the arguments put forward say that they are not replaying a lot of the discussions from the past, I think that implicit in a lot of the discussions has been that argument, and that was certainly what I heard during the second reading, and I have picked it up. I'm also making the point that if it were the case that there was an enthusiasm from this House about how we can take the opportunity of having left the European Union to now study and look at all of those laws, a real genuine enthusiasm from this House, then there might be less cynicism outside of this House. That was my point. I also was making a different point about timing, which is I'm saying I haven't heard from this House, both whilst I've been in it or before I got in it and watched it from the outside, an enthusiasm to rush through and to, as soon as we left in 2016, to then say, right, let's take all the laws, let's look at the EU retained laws, let's now make a decision about what we do with these laws. People didn't want to do that because they didn't accept the decision. And so now people are saying it's too rushed, and I'm pointing out there's a danger that this will come over, and it is coming over, as an attempt at blocking the taking back control. As to the delegated powers and the power grab, that's something I'm broadly been worried about from this government, I'm afraid, not just specifically this bill, and I've spoken on it many a time. So I don't know if the other noble lady wants to come.